Hey everybody, it is Kelly Nielsen here at Grace for Living After Loss. And on this channel, we discuss all things related to grief. What does it look like? What does it feel like? But most importantly, we share tips, tools, and resources for moving through grief and getting back to living a life that you love. If you're looking for more help or resources, be sure to subscribe to this channel and check out the links below. On this episode, we're going to be talking about a workplace guide for grief and loss. Specifically, I'm talking to team leaders, coworkers, HR, personnel, and managers. And I want to help you to be able to support the folks on your team that are going through grief and loss. Grief and loss is tremendously hard, and people really struggle when they're trying to balance work life and home life and dealing with grief and loss. So I want this video to educate you about grief and equip you with some tools and resources so that you can be a help to those who are grieving around you. The first thing we want to talk about is our uncomfortability talking about grief and loss. Talking about death and loss is an uncomfortable topic for most people, especially if you personally have not experienced grief or loss. You may be unsure of what to say or what to do. You may find yourself feeling awkward or uncomfortable. I just want to encourage you to do what you can to get over that, because the grieving employee on your team desperately needs someone to address the elephant in the room. A lot of people who are dealing with grief and loss report the isolation that they feel because nobody talks to them. People avoid them. They feel like social lepers because people are awkward and uncomfortable and don't know what to say. So they either don't address it at all, or sometimes they'll say insensitive or ignorant things. I want to encourage you to check out a different video I did called The 10 Things Not to Say When Someone Experiences Loss and 5 Helpful Alternatives. That would be a great place for you to start. The other thing I want to encourage you to meditate on and try to adopt is the difference between sympathy and empathy. A natural response when we encounter someone who's experienced loss, especially if we haven't experienced loss, we kind of put ourselves in their shoes. We think about how we would feel if we lost a loved one. And we may think that it's impossible to recover. We may think, I don't know how how I would get out of bed. I don't know how I would face the world. And it's really easy for us to unknowingly project that onto our friend or coworker, the person that is grieving. So we want to be careful to kind of, as much as we can, remove ourselves and don't think about this happening to us, but really try to hear and attempt to understand what their experience is like. Grief is different for every person. It's a unique journey that each individual goes through. There's no concrete timeline. There's no concrete linear way to process grief and loss. And so understand that how you would deal with grief and how maybe other employees would deal with grief is not going to apply to the person that's in front of you. So we really want to make sure to ask questions, to actively listen. And honestly, there's no better gift that you can give an employee than just really being present with them. Sometimes it's not the words that are comforting, but it's just our presence and knowing that someone is there to listen, someone cares about them truly, genuinely, and wants to do what they can to help. I'm here to tell you as well that this is such a critical point in your employee-employer relationship. If you do this well, if you navigate this well and really affirm and support the employee that's dealing with grief, you will have a loyal employee for a long time to come. Conversely, if you don't handle this well, if you don't do all that you can to support this person, you may find that they're leaving your company sooner rather than later. Now, we know this isn't 100% dependent on you, but I want to make sure that you have all the tools that you need in order to be a good support to your grieving employee. So a couple of things for you to know as well is the employees that are grieving take a lot of time off. And it usually takes them longer than they originally anticipated in order to recover and get back up to speed. So there are some reports that indicate that employees who go through grief take on average about 30 days off in the first year after grief and loss. So I just want you to have that in your mind, that there's going to need to be some conversations and flexibility around what time off looks like. I'm sure that you already have some sort of bereave leave built into your guidelines, built into your processes. And I want to encourage you as an organization to take a look at that and really analyze if that is adequate for the time that people need. Most companies do a couple of days up to a week. And I'm here to tell you that people, depending on who they lost and the nature of their loss, that most likely isn't going to be enough time for them to actually be in a place that they're able to come back and perform their job functions. So my encouragement to you, as much as you're able, to make their comeback flexible. The more flexibility and adaptability that you have, the more you can keep the conversation open between you and the employee to assess how they're doing. And then as they do come back to work, how are they doing in their day-to-day tasks? How are they feeling overwhelmed? Are they performing the job function appropriately? Does there need to be some adjustments made? The more you can have an open dialogue, and the more that the employee feels that you genuinely have their best interest at heart and that you're there to find solutions with them, the more that they're gonna, I feel like, open up and share with you really how they're doing, so that you both can proactively find solutions to their return to work that works best for them and the company. I want to encourage you as well to ask probing questions. When we work with clients in our company, we talk to them about how to go back to work, and we encourage them to be their own advocate, to speak with their HR personnel and their manager and their team, and to let them know how they would like to be addressed at work. For some people, when they go back to work, work is a pleasant and welcome distraction, and they like to make their workplace a loss-free zone. They go to work on purpose to have a place where they're not thinking about the loss. And some people can do that, and it becomes like a safe haven for them to go to work and just be very focused on the task, and they don't want to talk about their loss. For other people, it's a slap in the face if they go back to work, and especially if they have close personal relationships with people that they work with, if they feel connected to their coworkers and their place of employment, and if no one's bringing up the loss or addressing the elephant in the room that they just lost someone, it can feel really hurtful and insensitive. And the point is, you won't know unless you ask. So I really would encourage you to create a loss questionnaire that you can have your employee fill out and just let you know. Do they want you to address the loss? Do they not want you to address the loss? What would they like to be communicated to their manager, to their team members? How public or private do they want to be around the details surrounding the loss? Another question that you could ask is, would they like you to check in with them on anniversaries of the loss? Because I'm here to tell you, and especially if you have not been through loss yourself, really it's about 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, all the world stops and helps and pays attention and brings you casseroles and is there to support. But after about 3 weeks, everybody else goes back to their life, and the person who's left grieving is left to contend with the weight of the grief on their own, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to live life going forward. But I'm here to tell you that the anniversary of that loss, every month, especially for the first year, let's say the person passed away on the 10th of the month. Every month on the 10th of the month, that's a tough day for your employee. And I can tell you that it's going to be on their heart and mind. So a way that you can care for them and further support them is just acknowledging that day as it moves further in the months, because you may have forgotten about it. Other coworkers and other people on our team may have forgotten about it, but I guarantee you the employee has not forgotten about it, and those may be tough days for them. Now, this is something you can ask up front when they're coming back to work, if that's something that they would appreciate, or again, if that's something that they don't want you to do, because maybe work is a safe haven where they're not dealing with their loss. They're just really focused on the task, and it's actually a nice break for them. But the key point that I'm trying to drive here is open dialogue, and you helping to empower your employee to understand what they need from you as their employer in their workplace, and to be able to articulate that, and then you advocate on their behalf. Anything that you can do to also educate the rest of your staff about grief and loss, and anything we can do to destigmatize and make it so that it's not the elephant in the room, so that people will become more comfortable with the idea that we all face loss at some point in our life. We're all going to experience a loss of loved ones, and anything we can do to foster organization-wide conversations and make it not so taboo is going to help the people when they are grieving to deal with that, right? So I don't know about your individual organization, but I really want to encourage you as a company to think about your initial bereavement leave, family medical leave, to make the employee aware of all those things, but Understand your limits and your flexibility around, can they come back part-time? Is there a transition plan to ease their way back into work? One thing you may know about, not know about grief, is the physical toll that it takes on people. When you're grieving, it's exhausting. And the energy to even just get through one day sometimes just isn't there. So for a lot of people, coming back to work for just a couple hours or 4 hours might be all they can do initially. If there's an opportunity to do some of their job remotely, that's another thing that's helpful. It's one thing to get up and have the energy to do tasks, but to put yourself together and to go into an office and be in front of people is an entirely different amount of energy. So what provisions can you make for your grieving employee as they work to come back to work? And then I also want to encourage you to just schedule regular check-ins with each other to see how they're doing. And some other symptoms that you may not be aware of is that when people go through grief and loss, they're actually really cognitively impaired. They've experienced a bit of trauma to their mind and their body, and some common side effects are inability to focus, inability to articulate themselves. They're going to have a tough time taking thoughts and putting words to them. They're going to have a tough time focusing for long periods of time. And so they may want to do their job to their full capacity, but they just don't have it in them, most likely, when they first come back to be able to be their old selves. And for you to expect them to just jump back into their job and be performing at the same capacity that they were before the loss is just frankly unrealistic. So the more realistic you can be with them and make a graduated plan or a transitional plan to test things out and see how they do and adapt as you go, I'm telling you, you are, number one, going to get better performance out of the employee. And number two, you are really going to win them over in terms of loving them well during this season and being a support for them as opposed to something else that they need to manage, during this incredibly tough season in their life. Another thing to consider is there a different role within your organization that may be better suited for them during this grief recovery process and journey? Now, grief, like I said, is very individual. So certainly it depends on who they lost, and the nature of that loss is going to directly affect how difficult it is for them to recover. Certainly when you lose a second cousin or a great grandparent that passed away to old age is a different animal compared to losing a child to suicide or overdose, or losing a spouse to something sudden and traumatic and tragic. So you want to just be cognizant that it may take a good while for this person to be able to recover and perform the way that they were before the loss. Another great thing that you can do is just share resources with them. I encourage everyone that grief is very much a solo sport in the sense that they have to do the work themselves, but it's going to go a lot faster if they have adequate support. I am sure that you have, employee resources, insurance, things like that, but pointing them in direction of support groups, or better yet, either counselors or coaches that can help them to process this loss and help them with all the overwhelming things that we were just talking about. There are very specific things that they can do to help with the cognition. There are things they can do to help with the energy and things like that. Certainly, that is what we do here at our company. And I'll be sure to list the links below. We have monthly membership options and coaching options for people to work with us one-on-one to just process through this loss and get back to feeling good again. And it can be done in a relatively short period of time. Our program is 12 weeks long, and people are feeling amazing after that program. But I just want you to know, that it's going to shorten their time if they get some help and the right kind of help. And I also want to let you know, so that you can pass on the hope to them, that they can actually see a significant increase. They can recover quite a bit if they will adopt the correct tools and get the right support during that. So just to kind of recap some of the things we discussed, focus on empathy versus sympathy. Try to really hear what they're experiencing and find out what they need. Put together a questionnaire or some sort of inventory to find out from them, how do they want you to engage with them around this loss? How do they want their supervisor, their teammates, the company as a whole, do they want you to address it or not? Like, really find out from them how you can best support them. Point them to other resources for support. And then as much as you're able, be flexible and adaptable, and make sure that you schedule ongoing check-ins with them. Don't think that just when they come back in a month, everything's fine and whatever else. And that's one of the biggest things, as I mentioned, that people feel abandoned and isolated, because people check in with them initially, and then after a month or two, and especially if you're not crying every day at work, people just think that you're fine and you're over it. And so many times employees are silently suffering and a lot of times are really struggling with the responsibilities of their job, but they don't feel that it's a safe place to share with HR or their manager. And so things that just is a recipe for burnout for the employee, for mistakes to happen, and just not a successful transition back. So I just really encourage you to talk to them quite a bit when they first come back, but schedule when they come back a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month check-in, to have regular check-ins so you can continually assess how they're doing, how they're feeling, and what you can do to make sure that their transition back to work is a successful one. But I appreciate you even seeking out this video, taking the time to watch it, your heart and passion to want to really be there for your employees or teammates that are going through grief and loss. And just know that you reaching out to them and supporting them is one of the most meaningful things that you can do. Like I said, we feel really isolated and alone when we go through grief and loss. And when someone takes the time to really listen to us, to really try to understand our experience and be as accommodating or adaptable as they can be, that just literally is like oxygen. It's such a gift. So I applaud you for taking strides along that way. And certainly, if you'd like additional resources, feel free to reach out to us directly. We are all about equipping and empowering both the griever and those around them to do this grief recovery journey well. So until next time, guys, we'll see you.